On June 23rd, Ukraine received the status of a candidate for the EU membership. What exactly does that mean for Ukraine, and where on the long and winding road towards EU membership does that put our country? My name is Maxim Panchenko. I am journalist and analyst at UkraineWorld.org and NGO Internews Ukraine. The topic I would like to cover today is Ukraine's EU integration and the current developments on Ukraine's path toward EU integration. A couple of weeks back, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, gave a visit to Ukraine shortly before Ukraine was granted the candidate status, and she said that the EU was on the threshold of a historic decision on Ukraine. And that is not an exaggeration, because indeed for the past 8 years Ukrainians have not only unequivocally chosen to be westbound in their movement, but also have displayed their will to die for this choice. It was a case during the Revolution of Dignity. It also is the case now during the full-fledged invasion of Russia on Ukraine's territory. Given the nature of this path of Ukraine towards the candidacy and ultimately towards the EU membership status, the nature of the process during which Ukraine was given the candidate status also was quite exceptional. There was the so-called accelerated procedure applied for Ukraine, even though there is no such formal thing in the European Union as an accelerated procedure. It was rather a political decision, given the circumstances and the big will that Ukrainians have displayed to be a member of the European Union, that Brussels allowed Ukraine to receive the candidate status during just several months, as compared to maybe even several years, as it happens in case of other states. So now that Ukraine has received this status, what does it really mean for Ukraine? Well, I think one should really think about two different dimensions of what it means. The first one is political dimension. It's about values, because it is a confirmation that comes from Brussels about the recognition by the European Union of Ukraine's aspirations and the recognition of the fact that Ukrainians do not die in vain in the east and in the south of the country. The second bucket of things is, I would say, the materialistic things. What Ukraine receives materialistically when it comes to the candidate status. As a candidate state, Ukraine now receives access to the funds within the framework of the so-called pre-membership financing tool. This means that there are more channels through which EU funds can be channeled to Ukraine to support Ukraine on its way to the European membership path. Also, Ukraine is now capable of being part of many more European EU-based initiatives and programs. Of course, Ukraine has been cooperative with the European Union so far within the framework of many of them, but the scope of rights and involvement of Ukraine into those programs and many more programs is now going to be much bigger. And lastly, there is the issue of investment, of potential investment in Ukraine, because a state that is a candidate is much more trusted by EU member states, which means that they will be more willing to invest their money. It is needless to say that this is very important for Ukraine these days, not only because this would be a big help for Ukrainian economy as such, as it would have been in any case, but also because Ukraine during the last several months of war has lost as much as 50% of its GDP, and investment and trust that the European countries are going to have while investing in Ukraine is something Kyiv now badly needs. Receiving a candidate status is only one step on the long and winding road, as I said, towards the EU membership. This is usually a very long process, and in fact, the fact that we have received the candidate status within the framework of the accelerated procedure does not mean that this accelerated procedure will carry on, because there is a political debate within the European Union on that, given that Ukraine needs to pay its primary attention to the war these days and presumably for many months to come. This means that EU integration will not be as fast as it could have been. So Ukrainians need to understand that first, we must be talking about years, maybe up to 10 years for the completion of negotiations on the EU membership. Also, one needs to remember that there is a list of reforms that Ukraine needs either to adopt or to implement in order to even launch the negotiations agreement, which are now on hold before we do that. So we have a candidate status, but we still need to comply with the 7 requirements that the European Union has put for Ukraine. And those include implementation and adoption of reforms in the justice sector, in the anti-oligarch sector, in the anti-corruption sector, and several others, like for instance ensuring the rights of national minorities living in Ukraine, which means complying with the requirements of the Venice Commission that Ukraine had received a couple of years back. In sum, that means that we indeed are at the beginning rather than at the end of this big trip. However, the political will that the European Union and its member states have been displaying so far to accept Ukraine into its family is inspiring, and hopefully sometime soon we will see even more good news on the prospects of Ukraine on its path towards the EU membership. We'll have to see, and in the meantime, please follow us on our social media and also our website ukraineworld.org. See you soon in our next materials.